Hello ladies and gentlemen, I hope I'm going live about now. This is a very long anticipated video for me to make because we're getting just so close to WWDC next week, and then the week after. It's happening very quickly on the 10th of June, and just as I predicted, we are getting more concrete leaks and rumors about it from Mark Gurman. I apologize if I sweat a little more in this video. It's crazy humid today. We had like a full day of like thunderstorms, and now it's suddenly hot and I'm under my light, and I didn't want to put my fan up to not get a cold because I just came from the shower. So I apologize if I sweat. This is from excitement, yes, but it's primarily from the humidity. As you can see, Mark Gurman does have a nice write-up on his Power On newsletter. I don't know why, like the last couple of emails from the Power On newsletter have been amazing. You basically get the entire write-up completely ad-free and everything in like a nice like HTML compatible way. Let me turn off my TV so you guys don't have to hear what animes I'm watching. That wouldn't be good. No, just kidding. It's completely harmless by anime standards. So we already have a couple of people watching. Welcome. As always, I highly encourage you guys to like, subscribe, share, comment on the videos. I love me a lively live chat, but I also of course enjoy you commenting once a video has already been uploaded. That helps out tremendously with the algorithm. And beyond that, if you want to support this channel directly, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live, or you can subscribe to my Patreon. Think of Louis God, our one and for now only Mark Tech Pro Max subscriber on Patreon. So if you want to get a shout out every video, be like him. But of course, we do have less expensive tiers where you can support this channel, and of course even a free tier where you can just choose to communicate with me. So without further ado, I just want to really get into this because to me this is like super duper interesting. Now, thank you to our Apple Jesus, our Apple prophet Mark Gurman. I love putting him with the angelic halo in my thumbnails whenever there's like really good stuff from him. I don't know if this has a lot of super new stuff. It mainly builds on stuff we have already known, but it does add some new wrinkles to basically every part of the discussion, primarily about AI and the customization features that will be coming to iOS 18. So that's very interesting. Obviously his write-ups are pretty long, so I don't know if I'll go through the entire one. I've basically checked the summaries thus far, so you can see I'm just got ready and finished for you guys to stream at a somewhat acceptable time. I apologize for yesterday's stream, which happened at the time I usually never stream, close to noon. I know you guys like it more around the evening time or even around midnight, so I'm still trying to find the right balance. As always, please let me know in the comments what actually works best for you. As my audience changes, as the demographics change, I kind of really love like hearing from you guys, like what times work for you, what content you would like me to react to, what news and stuff like that. So that helps out tremendously. For that, of course, Patreon is open even to free tiers, and you can follow me on Twitter, which also helps because everybody there helps me collect information that I then put into videos, and I think that's a great cycle for everyone because I think we all learn as much as possible that way. So Apple bets that its giant user base will help it win in AI. Now this is already an interesting title. Now granted, he does have to make somewhat interesting titles because he does want people to click on it. However, I do believe that there's a lot of truth here, and this is why I do believe that Mark Gurman, beyond being obviously a well-informed leaker, is actually like a talented journalist in that regard, because he manages to make his stuff sound interesting, and he also has decent contextual understanding of like how Apple actually leverages like its ecosystem, its breadth of different devices, the way stuff interacts with each other. the way stuff builds on top of each other, like their history from iOS development to hardware development. And I think Mark Gurman really integrates all of that well. Now, he does not do 3-4 hour live streams the way I sometimes do, so I can obviously go into a lot of detail into why I think that it's not just Apple's giant user base, but it's specifically also the user base that Apple has kind of groomed almost into liking specific things, which to me involves stuff like people liking like a very curated experience, people liking apps rather than like web apps, people liking very native experiences, people liking experiences that are deeply integrated into the main OS and aren't just basically like different wrappers of Chromium-based web apps. So yeah, I think that Apple has a lot of room, not to necessarily win in AI, but I would just say succeed. And that's kind of very important because we are talking about a very, very expensive industry. I've just talked about yesterday how like Nvidia is like a $2.5 trillion company now because they're basically selling like their server GPUs at like crazy profit levels. So to me, Apple succeeding probably will not mean that they will reach the heights of like OpenAI in like pure AI, but they will definitely be able to leverage AI to keep people buying their hardware, to keep people sort of locked into their ecosystem. So let's see what Mark Gurman writes into what we can actually expect here as to how exactly Apple will leverage that. Though Apple's first set of modern AI features won't be as impressive as rival offerings, that's right, they won't have like a ChatGPT 4.0 like Scarlett Johansson like, but also not Scarlett Johansson flirty AI. So yes, if you just think of AI as basically chatbots, then yeah, I actually agree that on the surface they won't be as impressive as rival offerings. The company is betting that its massive customer base will give it an edge. Also, Sonos launches its long-awaited headphones. Yeah, interesting. Humane tries to self itself. Again, I've said it time and time again. Those AI hardware companies are a joke. So, and Apple brings on a new diversity chief. Again, I am very, very pro-diversity, but I don't really care about Apple's hiring practices beyond just seeing how the people actually perform at their job. Oh, by the way, I forgot. Cheers. So I won't be like analyzing whatever people Apple hires. That's just not my MO. So for starters, at Apple Inc.'s developer conference next month, that's WWDC, and while he says next month, it's 2 weeks away. It just so happens that we're at the very end of May and it's in the beginning of June. The company will unveil a different approach to AI, focusing on tools that ordinary consumers can use in their daily lives, which is funny that it has to take Apple to say, well, how about we actually use AI that, you know, like actually helps you, right? I mean, of course, AI and ChatGPT can write essays for you, and that's pretty useful, but it's not really daily life stuff. When it comes to calendar entries, reminders, all that jazz that Siri was actually in many ways a pioneer with and interacting with a chat AI basically, and then it does tasks for you. But when you actually remember Siri, look it up, Siri iOS 5. You could actually see that even from its design, right? Here's if you had like a search query with weather, it basically presented to you the UI of like the native weather app. If you were asking for it to set a timer, it would show you like actually a beautifully made UI that like referenced the regular clock app. Beyond that, just like sending messages, they would turn blue as an iMessage was sent. And then clicking on it, everything just felt familiar when you kept going through it. A calendar entry. Oh my god, is that like a 12-year-old article? Yeah, that's funny actually. But yeah, if you look at the calendar stuff, that looked like the regular calendar app, and it still does the same. It just looks all a lot simpler now that we have gotten rid of skeuomorphism and are basically in the completely flat era of UI design. You can lament it. I personally prefer the modern way. I do believe we need a little bit more depth. I kind of prefer macOS the way it is, like the icons and stuff like that, over the completely flat look of iOS. But I also probably wouldn't want to return to the skeuomorphism of like iOS 4 and stuff like that. Yeah, you can basically see here, it basically like takes part of your app and would show it. Now, obviously, the the queries you would have for Siri would have to be relatively simple. In fact, Siri back in that day, and I think up until this day, has like a section where she like gives you like tips what you can exactly ask of her, or it, to be more precise. And obviously that's pretty simple, like create a specific calendar entry for that day or whatever. But the fact that it would just feel so native, that is what in my opinion made Siri special. And then when Google Assistant came along, it was undoubtedly more powerful, but unfortunately it lacked all of that cohesiveness in terms of design, feeling, and it got plenty of Android integration over time, but never quite as deep as Siri, and obviously not pretty much none of that got replicated for iOS. And yeah, this was by the way what I was talking about, which like great summary, by the way. What article is that even? Oh, that's still all that The Verge article, man. That was the good era of The Verge, where it would show you like what exactly you can ask of it, sorted like by app and feature. So yeah, Apple was really, really on top of their game. You can also see stuff like even like that's the German one, is setting an alarm and basically showing you like that old switch design with blue and stuff, that it's turned on, so you could actually immediately also like turn it back off. That's also something great, even with the way Apple integrates those kinds of touches into the dynamic island these days, which is like which in my opinion replicates a lot of those like widgety kind of interactions from inside an app. I've always preferred that over like just an entire calendar spread out on your home screen, basically, which is like, I mean, it's nice to see your calendars and stuff like that, but at which point am I better off just opening the entire app that gives me the entire functionality, doesn't eat up battery life in the background or whatever. Granted, the calendar widget won't eat up too much battery life either, but yeah, I just wanted to say, like, the way Apple has done specific things has always appealed more to me. So obviously back in the day, nothing was quite rivaling iOS in general, and then Siri came along and that felt super futuristic. Obviously a lot of things have shifted over time. Hardware and Android competitors have gotten better, Android itself has gotten better, but to me I still feel those small touches where Apple just takes care like basically no other consumer tech company. You will find that attention to detail in like high-end fashion and stuff like that, or even like restaurants that cater to like high-paying customers or whatever. But like when it comes to like relatively regular consumer tech, I still think that Apple is kind of untouched. So let's continue. The idea is to appeal to a user's practical side and leave some of the more whiz-bang features to other companies. Apple is in a challenging position. It needs to convince consumers and investors that it's doing exciting things in AI, but the company is following major announcement from Microsoft Corp. Yes, but we got from Microsoft Corp. What did we get? What was it called? Microsoft, or was it like Windows Rewind or whatever? Recall? Was it Recall? Oh man, all those features. I think Rewind was the third-party solution. Yeah. So Recall takes snapshots of your screen and stores them in a timeline. Snapshots are taken every 5 seconds while content on the screen blah 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 is changing. So what you basically get from this is like basically like Time Machine on Mac OS, but it's based on screenshots. It's not based on like the save functions of individual apps, so it can work system wide, and then it utilizes like a neural processing unit or even your GPU. I've seen people like already hack it on the latest Windows version, basically like repurposing other parts of a chip to work that way, and then it uses that AI capability to analyze those screenshots. It's not really hyper AI because it's basically like the text recognition itself is basically not AI at all, but I assume that like image recognition on those screenshots, that will be AI based. I still don't know how fully baked that feature is. It almost feels like early access, so yeah, I cannot talk about that too much. We'll also see how it specifically works with the new chip processors, the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Plus and X Elite, that have like 45 tops, and then of course how it will work on like Intel's Lunar Lake, AMD Strix Point. So we'll obviously have a lot of comparisons going forward, and Microsoft in general is like putting AI into pretty much everything because it's beneficial to them. They have a large push for AI. It has helped them achieve like new highs when it comes to like their stock valuation. However, Apple is not as fully fully bought into AI the same way. Apple will not be building gigantic server farms based on NVIDIA's B100 graphics cards. If anything, it's at least according to Mark Gurman, they will be supposedly like repurposing M2 Ultra chips, and I assume like other processors that at that point have sort of run their course in terms of sales. But we'll see. The other is that he brings up is Alphabet announcements. That's Google. That was disastrous. The Google I/O was largely laughed at, and I've brought it up yesterday. But like Google AI Pizza, and basically Google is undoing basically 20 years worth of goodwill because their search engine, in my opinion, was still unparalleled. In some specific stuff, Bing was like competitive, but yeah, Google itself was like offering good stuff. But now it's like if you ask like Google's AI feature, and that the cheese falls basically off your pizza, then Google will suggest adding some glue, because that was based on like some basically memester Reddit suggestion or whatever. So 1/8 of a cup of Elmer's glue in with the sauce mixing, but preferably like non-toxic glue. Jan Hendrik, welcome to my German viewer. A nice Sunday to you too. You find the topic interesting? Yeah, I definitely do as well. And I do like covering it in length, but I won't be here for like 3 hours today. So if you don't have too much time yourself, I probably won't be, at least not for longer than 2 hours. I do have to hit the gym still. So yeah, if you ever thought that like Google has like an unsurmountable lead in AI that Apple won't be able to catch up to, similar to like OpenAI or Microsoft's Copilot, yeah, Google is a real shit show when it comes to AI currently. They're real businesses like Google Search, YouTube. They're all actually running pretty well, and they're very profitable. They fired people, further increased their profit margins. They're even like more successful now in like the cloud compute space. Like Google Cloud is now taking some market share from like Azure and AWS from Amazon. But when it comes to AI, where they are actually spending the most amount of money and research time on, it just seems like they cannot catch up to even like ChatGPT 4 basic, like not Turbo, not 4.0, not like upcoming 5. So Google Gemini seems like it's basically trapped 2 years in the past when it comes to capabilities, and when it comes to hallucinations, it might actually be worse than that. Which is weird, because to me, it feels like Google is almost doing nothing to like fact check their AI, because they do have their existing Google search algorithms, and they had like a pretty capable Google Assistant that never would have given this kind of response. That to me suggests that Google is like basically throwing like large language models with a lot of processing power at problems, but then is applying like nothing of their actual expertise in terms of search, in terms of being able to like disregard like bad results basically, and just giving you the same approach as everyone else. It feels like everyone is doing the exact same game with AI, but like minutiae differences when it comes to the actual underlying algorithms and the processing power, and of course the parameters, the tokens, that then decides how good it actually is. But it seems like the more data it collects, somehow hallucinations are not getting magically fixed by that. And Mark Gurman says those have stolen the spotlight. I don't think they did. Quite honestly, I have seen a lot of sentiment from people, and I know it's not like the vast majority, but I've really seen people like in the tech community be like, bro, can we please talk about something else rather than AI? Like, I like AI, but I do want AI to actually do shit for me. Like, I don't want everything to just be a chatbot, right? So Apple is now preparing to spend a good portion of its WWDC conference laying out its AI related features. At the heart of the new strategy is Project Grey Matter, a set of AI tools, great name by the way, a set of AI tools that the company will integrate into core apps like Safari, Photos, and Notes. The push also includes operating system features such as enhanced notifications. So you can actually see I've been on record now for close to a year, since I started streaming very regularly, that I am all for AI as long as it's like integrated into features that like I know and I like, and I want those features to get better because I rely on them. So enhancing the Safari experience, existing apps, which probably won't be limited to just Photos and Notes, is to me 10 times more important than ChatGPT's ability to write an essay for me. I know that one of that might actually seem more impressive, like I've shown to my grandma, because I was on a visit there, like how like AI can write you a poem, and how it can write you like almost a song, and a short story. And she was like, wait, where is it taking it from? And I was trying to say, well, it basically learns from a lot of stuff on the internet, it then abstracts it, and then it gets sort of creative, but its creativity is not quite as human creativity. And she was like, wow, but it's impressive. But she also is like, well, what exactly is it for in that regard? I'm like, well, for example, in the creative process, you can like ask it to create like, I didn't explain it to her based on game development, but for example, in game development, if you want to create like a lot of like pre-production material, basically like how do I want a game to look, like do I want like scary aliens there, scary monsters and whatever, and you can basically very quickly ask AI to draw you something up. You shouldn't be then taking that exact same thing and putting into the game, the final process. You should have it looked at by real artists. You should ask them for their input. Preferably you would want a fully from the ground up approach, but some inspiration is not bad. Like, artists are always inspired by other artists, and AI is inspired by artists, believe me. So if artists get inspired by AI, which was inspired by artists, I don't see too much of a problem with that, as long as it then gets actually like, artistic. But yeah, I don't think that Apple will get into like generative AI features like that, but this is where I see like the future for stuff like ChatGPT and what is it called, like that picture generating thing, like something with Mind. or whatever. I haven't used it in a while. And Google Gemini has like its own image generation feature these days. This is where we got a lot of the disaster with like the black Nazis and like the where every person was like a person of color, because apparently like the AI was like encouraged in some hard code to like be diverse, but in its search for diversity it forgot that white people also existed. So that was quite funny to me. But yeah, Apple is not doing stuff like that. Apple is trying to integrate AI into their operating system, into apps you already use, and into system level features like notifications. The system will work as follows. Much of the processing for less compute intensive AI features will run entirely on device. Now, he does not specify which hardware you will need. I entirely believe that M4 is fully ready for that. And if M4 is fully ready for that, except for some bandwidth questions, I fully believe that A17, which is like has like 10% worse neural engine, but is probably the same neural engine design, it's just lower clock than the one on the M4. I believe those two should be handling like basically everything that's coming up at WWDC. And then if Apple has more AI features to show, especially stuff that they will deem to be running offline, so on device, I believe that stuff will be shown directly next to like iPhone 16 and whatever else Apple introduces. I don't think they can make too much like hardware exclusive, because they do want also people to like have familiarity with their AI. They do want the press and stuff like that for it, and they do know that AI won't really sell devices that much. They might tell that to like investors, but I fully believe that Apple knows like, oh, AI will just be an extra feature in iOS 18 and whatever. So to me, I fully believe that A17 and M4 will be able to run basically everything shown at WWDC. As for M3, I don't know. M3 kind of launched in that unfortunate time where it's like technically after the A17 chip, but it had like a neural engine that was worse. As for older processors, M2, M1, A16, A15, I really couldn't tell you that. Obviously, we know that they are below like what Microsoft requires for like the AI features on their operating system. They want like 40 tops, 45 tops. However, that is not like, that does not mean that AI features do not work on processors with 15 tops, especially if like there's like something like Core ML that integrates well between CPU AI acceleration, GPU AI acceleration, and then the Apple Neural Engine. I fully believe that some AI features will definitely still find their way to older processors. I don't think older than A14, but it definitely won't be all things. I think especially maybe like a highly enhanced Siri might be like a completely online thing for older devices, but then Apple will like advertise its superior privacy and its superior security, because it runs basically 80-90% on device on like newer devices. We already have that dichotomy going on today, for example, for features such as like creating an alarm or like a timer. Siri already runs on device. You can try it out. This is why it's completely instantaneous when you ask something like that. But once you do something that results in a web query, this is when Siri does fall back to its software, to its cloud-based computing, and this is where it gets a lot slower. But if a feature requires more horsepower, the work will be pushed to the cloud, and this is where stuff like Mark Gurman mentioning M2 Ultra chip based servers comes into effect. Apple is bringing new AI features to iOS 18 and macOS 15, and both OS will include software that determines whether a task should be handled on the device or via the cloud. Most of the on-device features will be supported by iPhone, iPad, and Mac chips released in the last year or so. This is also my speculation. The cloud component, meanwhile, will be powered by M2 Ultra chips located in data centers as previously reported. Now, some of you might jump onto, wait, why M2 Ultra? M2 Ultra has like a worse neural engine than an M3 chip. Well, for one, it's an Ultra chip, right? So it has a ton of GPU compute, CPU compute that it can lend to that, but it's also just a massive bandwidth chip, especially if maybe Apple pairs it. I don't know if that would be possible with the built-in memory controller, but maybe Apple pairs it on servers with like HBM memory instead of LPDDR-X memory or LPDDR5 memory. That's purely speculation though. But yeah, M2 Ultra will be more than powerful enough to accelerate tasks, especially if like one M2 Ultra won't be enough, which of course it will, then it can still ask another M2 Ultra. There are several new capabilities in the work for this year, and this is where it gets a lot more exciting, including ones that transcribe voice memos. We've had obviously stuff like that. Also, I believe running locally on Google Pixel devices, so that's pretty cool. Retouch photos with AI. It depends on how extensive that feature is. Given that Apple is a little bit of a stickler for like real stuff, I don't see them doing like the generative AI stuff that we've seen on like Samsung and Pixel devices, but I can definitely like remember how back in the day Apple introduced like red eye reduction on like in the Photos app, because once they offered the flash on the iPhone 4, like a lot of people started getting red eyes in their images, and so they basically had a very basic tool to remove that. It didn't look great because it couldn't like fully like replicate like your natural eye color, but now given that it could do something like Google's like best shot feature by capturing several images and then deciding which parts of the individual images can be stitched together into one best shot, maybe something like that could be used here. It will make searches faster and more reliable in the Spotlight feature, which is great because we have gone through an article that like dissected iPadOS and found that like Spotlight is not as good on iOS as on macOS, but also macOS gives you like third-party alternatives. So if Spotlight itself gets like significantly enhanced through AI features, that obviously is very exciting. They also will improve Safari web search, which is the first time I heard of that, because I think he means like that website summarization feature, which is not quite the same thing as web search, but we have seen like browsers pop up, and we obviously saw like at Google I/O that Google will be doing the same thing, which instead of giving you like a real website, which I know website developers will absolutely love when Google completely destroys all of their ad revenue and their search engine optimization through that, it will basically give you a summary of that web page, which like if I was reading this, for example, you could imagine that like the UI of the website just falls to the website, to the wayside. It becomes super similar to like how probably how like the reading mode would look, right? Maybe it like even gets rid of the images and whatever, and maybe instead of having like obviously that longer write-up, it would be basically like bullet points. So that's how you can kind of imagine that. And of course, as I said, there are already features like that. I have found them to be rather missed than hit, but I know some people love it. Some people are like, oh, I'm using it over Google. And I'm like, great. So Google is not getting your money, which is okay. Google is a big company. They can stomach that. But now you're also doing basically everything to avoid like regular website providers also getting your money through ads, which like congratulations, you skipped on the ads, but now like the entire business behind writing articles and stuff like that is completely effed. Like news already is kind of completely in the dumpster through the internet because the price for like a digital ad is so much lower than like a newspaper ad. But yeah, sure, let's kill that even more. and it will automatically suggest replies to emails and text messages. Obviously, this stuff actually even like predates like the modern AI bubble. Like Google has had like smart replies throughout Android, but especially like through Gmail for quite a while. I can assure you it's not good enough for regular usage. I don't know how much they have since then or plan to improve it through like actual modern AI. But it's actually pretty good for like one sentence stuff, right? But obviously, yeah, it's like, why? One sentence I can type or dictate one myself. And if I want to write something longer, then I really want it to be correct. So at this point, it's neither here nor there. It doesn't solve a big problem. And the small problem is not a problem at all. So yeah. Unless you wanted to kind of do like what Google has shown during I.O., where it like gives you like crazy summaries of hundreds of emails, or where it might even like respond to all the emails simultaneously. And if you trust the AI enough to do that, then that's up to you. You can definitely expect me to not be in that position and that trusting of AI and stuff. Not because I distrust AI, it's just that I prefer to do some things myself. Like for example, my main bank account, I don't have online banking for it. I don't want it to get hacked or anything. And this is why I just go to the bank once a week, manage my stuff, and go out. That's it. And I know that's a pretty archaic attitude from a guy who has like Apple Pay and everything, but since some things are almost just as convenient in doing them manually, I don't see why I would hand them over to tech completely. The Siri personal assistant will get an upgrade as well, with more natural sounding interactions based on Apple's own large language models. This is very interesting because this is the first time Mark Gurman basically commits to Apple using their own large language models, like at least for stuff like Siri. A lot of stuff was like in discussion if they would like be giving basically like into a licensing deal with like OpenAI for ChatGPT or Google for Gemini. Now that still could be layered on top of Apple's own large language model effort, but a lot of what we heard like around a month ago actually suggested that Apple's LLMs would not yet be ready for stuff to launch into iOS 18. Now, obviously, that is very, very much subject to change because we all know how in the last couple of years it has kind of become commonplace for features to like launch into to be shown off at WWDC, but then not actually like launch until months later and something like that. So to me, this could be something announced at WWDC, but then it could be like, oh, but it's launching with like iOS 18.2 in like December or even January of next year, right? But this definitely feels encouraging. So, and Apple's own LLM will be the core tech behind their generative AI effort. There's also more advanced Siri coming to Apple Watch for on-the-go tasks. Developer tools, including Xcode, are getting AI enhancements too. This is why I always say during every one of my stream that expect like Apple's AI rollout to be very much incomplete for like the following 2 years. And what I mean by that is Apple will gradually introduce new features, fix bugs that will inevitably come up with a completely new software paradigm like this, and then they will build on top of the introduced features and on top of the fixes, and only then, by the time Apple comes out and like announces iOS 20, and then iOS 20 actually comes out, would I say do we have like a very cohesive view of like the next 5 or 6 years of iOS going forward. Whatever will be happening throughout iOS 18, iOS 19, and early parts of iOS 20, to me, because it's not just iOS, right? There's macOS, which might get some features later, iPadOS, which obviously is always in some ways behind iOS. Of course, Apple Watch, some features might run first on the cloud, then as Apple introduces more powerful processors, it might run on device. So basically, when I say iOS, I mean like the entire Apple's like operating system and software portfolio, because as you can see, developer tools does include stuff like even like Apple offering like cloud-based compute for developers. So that to me suggests that obviously in the cloud they might give you like an option to spend more money and then you will be basically programming with an M2 Ultra in the cloud that also happens to have access to AI features. And Xcode by itself will also get AI features. I assume that Apple will probably not be too stingy there money-wise, because for one, they do want to encourage developers to stay on their platform, to make their platform the best it can be. And I kind of would see it like, if you are like a paying developer and you're paying $100 a year for development tools, then here's like a minimum amount of hours you get for free, or a maximum amount of hours you get for free using certain AI features, and then you pay on top if you like really need like even more comprehensive and capable AI hardware in the cloud and stuff like that. And whatever runs on device, I fully believe will be free. So all of that will be AI enhanced. By the way, guys, more people have joined. I just want to remind you again, please subscribe, please share the video to anybody who you think might like it. Please comment. I love me a lively live chat. It helps me grow myself. It helps me to know what you agree with, what you disagree with. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That helps out obviously tremendously, grow out our community. And if you want to support this channel directly, you can send a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live, or you can subscribe to my Patreon, which goes from free all the way up to Mark Tech Pro Max, which will get you a daily shout out, as I did earlier before with Louis Gott, an amazing supporter of this channel, subscribing to the highest tier on my Patreon. One standout feature will bring generative AI to emojis. This is actually really fun to me because as somebody who uses like memojis for my thumbnails, as you guys can see from every thumbnail ever on my channel basically, this is great. And I hope it's not just emojis. I hope it is memojis and animojis, because Apple is the absolute best at emojis. Like, their emoji design is so simple, so straightforward, so easy to understand, so visible, just in like the most basic way, in the way that like Samsung's emojis never got to that degree. Google's emojis got better over time, but it took them like decades. So Apple bringing Gen AI to emojis is very fun, because this is where Gen AI can actually shine. But there is like no 20-finger drawing for emojis. It will probably be like able to generate like different hats for like emojis, or different types of beards or whatever. And that to me sounds fun. And since it's like a very simplified, like cartoony design, there isn't that much that can go wrong with it. And this is where I do trust it. And by the way, this is also probably so easy that it might actually run on device. Again, it's a lot of speculation on my part, but it could be. The company is developing software that can create custom emojis on the fly based on what users are texting, which is awesome. That's exactly how I would want it to work. That means you'll suddenly have an all-new emoji for any occasion, which this will basically lock people into iOS to a degree, unless you tell it probably to send that emoji as an image, because emojis are actually like hard-coded into the OS. There's like an emoji consortium, like an international organization almost, that decides which emojis are part of the emoji standard. And this is why, even if you send like on your keyboard an emoji that looks like an Apple-made emoji, but you send it to Android, it will look different there, because it will recognize what kind of emoji it is and show you the emoji that is fitting for that operating system. If you send an emoji that does not exist on other platforms, for example, because your operating system has support for newer emojis, then it basically shows you like that dead skull emoji, or sometimes like a question mark. I know some operating systems handle it differently. And I assume Apple will give this like hard support inside iOS 18, where like it like those auto-generated emojis will be visible in a very great way on iOS 18 and up. And then for older operating systems, and of course for devices on different operating systems, you will get like that question mark or whatever, and that will keep people further locked into Apple's ecosystem. And then a year from now, you can expect Google to complain to like standards bodies that Apple has implemented RCS, but now their custom emojis are still keeping people locked into iMessage or whatever. It's or something stupid like that. So you will suddenly have an all-new emoji for any occasion beyond the catalog of options that Apple currently offers on iPhone and other devices. Another fun improvement, one unrelated to AI, and this is why I put it into the title because that's pretty interesting to me, will be the revamped iPhone home screen. And this is something we've heard quite a lot about without actually getting a lot of details. We basically got a lot of re-reporting on the same stuff for a couple of weeks now. That will let users change the color of app icons and put them wherever they want. So what we already knew before would be that it would basically get rid of that automated grid where if you put like an emoji basically down below but you don't have anything on top of that, it will jump automatically to the top. That's how iOS has behaved from the beginning of time. And this will apparently go away now, behave a lot more like Android. Or if you don't want to be like compared to Android, it will basically behave a lot more like a Mac desktop screen, right? Which, by the way, how does it work on iOS? Can I just put a home? No, I cannot. Can I do that? No, it all falls still back into a grid. Wait, what? Can I do that? Like that? Okay, no, it has its own grid logic. I always forget it because I probably would want to stay inside the grid because it just feels like the most natural and the most comfortable to me. But obviously I understand if some people like want to grow beyond that. Times change, expectations change, and obviously I am for Apple growing with their community. I don't want the iPhone to at some point fail because Apple was in small ways too stubborn to implement features that people were asking for. Like iOS 14 already introduced widgets, then Apple introduced more home screen, more lock screen customization stuff. Apple introduced like shortcuts, which is like super in-depth, super powerful, and of course macOS gives you a lot more customization on top of that. Then you get all the stuff that now gets mandated by like regulatory bodies like European Union's Digital Markets Act. So yeah, a lot of stuff will be a lot more customizable and a lot more open on iOS by the end of the decade. It will probably be in many ways unrecognizable. I just hope that Apple sticks to a relatively high quality control level. The thing that is actually new here is changing the color of the app icons. Now this does says color, and obviously if you actually go into an app, sometimes an app already lets you choose like a color for its app icon or even like a different icon, but that is specific to an app. When it comes to customizing like the actual app icon on like a system level, you can sort of cheat your way into that by, instead of having an actual app icon, you have like a custom shortcut, and you just customize that shortcut to opening a specific app. But for a shortcut, you can choose whatever background you kind of want, and that's how it works. But that's a lot more cumbersome than it works on Android, where you can like download entire like app skin like albums basically. Now I don't know if it will be that comprehensive or it will be simply like, oh, if your app has like a ground color like blue, then on a system level we will allow the user without the input of the developer to change it to green or red or something like that. I don't know if I think it probably won't work if the developer doesn't want it to, but I couldn't tell you for now. We don't get too many details here. For instance, you can make all your social icons blue or finance related ones green, and they won't need to be placed in the standard grid that has existed since day one in 2007. Exactly, so you can basically find a custom motif there if you want to. However, as I say, I don't know if that will require the cooperation of developers, if it will require apps to be like coded with a new API or something like that, or if Apple will like completely overwrite all developer control and just let you do whatever you want. But the issue is like changing the color by itself is actually in some ways more complicated than changing the full app icon. So I don't know how that would work. I kind of assume that it probably just makes sense for them to like give you support for like icon packs the way Android does it. I probably would never use that, but it's definitely something people are fond of, and this is why they set up like shortcuts the way I described. So yeah, definitely interesting how Apple is adding basic customization features, but in my mind also features that weren't really missing. Like, to me, you can just take it or leave it at that point. I don't think Apple was ever lazy for not giving us those features. I don't think that it was ever a reason to switch to Android. But hey, if you were somebody who was really appreciative of that feature being on Android, and maybe now you're an iPhone customer, or maybe you're very, very new to the tech space and you're deciding between iOS and Android, and you've heard that Android has like customizations that iOS doesn't have, well, you can now at least scrap those two off that list. A big part of the effort... Wait, did I do something wrong? Another fun improvement... Oh, yeah. A big part of the effort is creating smart recaps. The technology will be able to provide users with summaries of their missed notifications and individual text messages, as well as of web pages, news articles, documents, notes, and other forms of media. So this to me suggests that the feature is probably system-wide, but with like specific tuning for individual apps, especially like Apple-based apps. Like, I assume like Pages will behave differently from Keynote, will behave differently from Numbers, where they will try to prioritize what they were actually designed for. And then it will give you summaries, which probably is like, I assume if it says like notifications and individual text messages, I assume notifications will be like something system-wide, but then Apple will have like a specific tooling for the text messages. And if it says text messages, I would be very surprised if they also didn't account for like emails that you receive in Apple's Mail app and stuff like that. So I assume that Apple will just open this up as an API, say, oh, it works like system-wide, similar to how like the response notification is basically like a very simple API, right? You can just swipe on every message you receive and do some basic tasks with it, but you can also integrate it like very deeply and almost like make the AI of the actual the UI of the actual app pop up, right? The way that if you swipe up on an iMessage, it suddenly gives you like your actual conversation, like almost like a mini preview of the full iMessage app. And I assume that this would kind of be like the hierarchy of the functionality here. The web pages summarization, we've talked about that before. We've talked about how it's probably good for the consumer, probably bad for the entire idea of writing articles online, which is that's also how we get to news articles. It will be interesting if Apple integrates any kind of like AI summarization into the Apple News app and into Apple News Plus, which I assume that their partners probably won't like. Documents, I've said that. Page's keynote numbers, but I also assume it won't prevent like stuff like Word, PowerPoint, and whatever accessing that. Notes, obviously text and whatever. And other forms of media is where it actually gets interesting, because everything before that was very text-based. I wonder if it will like work for graphs that aren't like simple like Excel graphs and stuff you just find online. If it will be like able to describe an image to you or something like that, which obviously goes beyond just like an AI feature and like toy to play around with. This could actually be like an awesome accessibility tool, right, for like the vision impaired. So again, some good stuff, some questionable stuff, and it all depends on how it's implemented. Of course, Apple will have to do all this while assuring consumers that its commitment to privacy remains strong. I think people are kind of overplaying the dangers of privacy when it comes to AI, because the companies who have thus far done AI, right, they don't care about privacy anyway. Google is like big into AI. Microsoft is big into AI. So when people are saying, well, those companies like collect a lot of data and whatever, there are two parts of that. First, those companies always collect a lot of data. And secondly, the way they approach AI is extremely expensive. Like, as I said, with like giant server farms, with like the latest NVIDIA processors, have to be like liquid cooled and whatever. There's even like thought of putting servers right at the bottom of the ocean, where you just let the water flow through. I know it's not that simple, but it is in some ways that. Apple is still free to not save your data, to not like have like non-encrypted like data sheets of like your name plus all your data queries and stuff like that. So this idea that AI has like any privacy concerns that go way beyond all the other stuff. We have already been working with algorithms. We have already had features like Siri. Apple already works with Google because Google is like their like partner search engine. So if Apple wanted to, they could have gotten access to your search queries too. But they won't, because that's not their core business. They don't sell your data. In fact, Apple currently has to buy data to feed like their own large language model and stuff like that. Because guess what? Unlike Google, for one, they do not have like a search engine that will go through the entire web, which is already very legally and morally dubious, but they also don't store your data quite the same way. They obviously have some data collection, and you can opt into some stuff, opt out of other stuff, but it's nowhere near what Google has on you or what Microsoft has on you. The company has spent years pitching the benefits of on-device processing. Exactly. And Siri had already been part of that when it went partially on-device. And how it can better keep data safe and secure. And how it also benefits you, like it works in stuff where you have like slow internet access, and it might even be better for battery life, because even while on-device processing obviously uses the processor, it might be so fast that it could be legit more efficient than having to like collect the data there, upload it, and then download the response, right? So there are like unique benefits to on-device processing. I say unique as if we haven't done primarily on-device processing for a lot of stuff forever. But yeah, Apple has been smartly pitching it, and in my opinion, it has also made the entire operating system feel very, very immediately responsive. Like when you, for example, when Samsung pitched like their generative AI features in their Photos app, for a lot of it, we didn't know which parts would run on device, which parts would run on the cloud, and pretty much everything turned out to be working from the cloud, which was funny because it was Galaxy S24 exclusive, even though it's obviously something that could run on a 20-year-old device for that matter, because it just runs on the cloud. But this is the difference why now if you go into like an edit stuff on the device, now it takes a super long waiting times, and it basically does not feel immediate at all. So to me, Apple will want to prevent that feeling as much as possible, and this is why I also believe that to a degree, while they will restrict like some features to newer devices, I believe that they might restrict AI features from older devices, like very old devices in general. Like what I mean by that, if you have a device that can do basically no on-device processing, I kind of believe that Apple would also exclude it from like online processing, because Apple's mantra here would be, look, it's not like 1 out of 10 queries where we have to send you to the cloud. We now always send you to the cloud, and that costs us extra bandwidth and whatever. So if you want better AI, get a newer device that does most of it online, and then we for free give you access to stuff that we have to build servers for, that we have to train a large language model for again and again for years to come. So I can see stuff being like on A16, maybe even A15 devices. Maybe some stuff might only come to the Pros that had like 6 gigs of RAM when the non-Pros had like 4. I don't think we'll see. We might not even see like A12 devices get like iOS 18, but I definitely don't see like an iPhone XS getting like any on-device processing. So that's kind of my theory here, that Apple wouldn't want to make the iOS experience feel very different from how it has always felt. In some ways, Apple's mantra will be like, it's better to not have a feature than have a poor and or slow feature. It's even criticized rivals for not using the same approach. Exactly, I've called this out several times, right? What happens in your iPhone stays on your iPhone. So very much like Apple mocking companies that do a lot of data collection on you. Now it has to argue that its cloud-based AI features will maintain privacy. This, by the way, to me is weird. You guys know that Apple does a ton of stuff on the cloud. Like there are parts of Siri that run on the cloud. Obviously, iCloud. Guess where Apple stores iCloud shit? So this idea that Apple is to repitch everything now that part of it is more on the cloud than before, that to me is just weird. It's like maybe they will have to explain that to people who like completely unknowledgeable about technology, but anybody who understands anything understands that privacy is not only a question of does it run on device, does it run in the cloud, but it's primarily a feature related to policy. If you do it really poorly with on-device stuff, on-device stuff can still become subject to like poor data collection, right? Just because a feature can run on device does not mean that the company cannot put a clause into like your usage contract, basically, that they then have access to the data the next time you do a backup or something like that. So don't for a second believe that privacy is fully dependent on cloud or not. So AI features will still maintain privacy despite sending potentially sensitive info to a data center. Yeah, I've already talked about that. To explain this about face, again, it's not an about face. This is where I like Mark Gurman, but this is where he's also a journalist, right? I'm a live streamer, a hobbyist live streamer at that. I don't have much skin in the game, how many people watch me and stuff like that. Obviously, I enjoy it. The more engaged you are, the happier I am. But I don't have to basically lie to you with stuff like that. I wouldn't say that about Google or people were like saying, oh, the privacy nightmare of Google's AI and Microsoft AI and them like data scraping the entire internet to feed their AI. And I'm like, guys, they've been doing all of this for years with their search engines, with their deep access to data on their operating systems, with Google Maps, all of that stuff. And before we had AI, again, we had like algorithms that did a lot of the same stuff. So no, I don't think that those companies are doing like an about face. I don't think that Apple will be doing an about face. I think if anything, AI just brings more to the forefront what the company's actual policies are. The company will likely stress that it isn't building profiles of customers. Exactly. Which again is also something they could still do even with the current tech, right? They don't need AI features to build a profile of customers. Something Google and Meta Platform Inc. have been criticized for doing. By the way, building a profile of a customer is not necessarily bad, and I have over time said time and time again that if it takes like a lot of data collection to make a feature like Google Assistant, which at that point was really superior, as good as it is, I am fine with people accepting that, but then also using Google Assistant. What I'm not fine is like default collection, extreme data collection, stuff like that. And when it comes to AI, I'm also fine with if Apple's AI works really well and if I can feed it data. By the way, that's a lot of stuff right now I have in the cloud. Like, for example, I have this voice feature by Apple, personal voice, where if, God forbid, I ever lose my voice because of some kind of motor neuron disease or whatever, then Apple will be able to swoop in and allow me to still speak with my natural voice in like a FaceTime call and something like that. And for that, I didn't just record my voice on my iPhone, but then I uploaded it also to the cloud for the simple reason so that obviously if I lose this iPhone, if I switch to a new one, and at that point, again, God forbid, I don't have my voice already. Now that feature has to be in the cloud and it has to be there forever because I'm not capable of reproducing that data again unless, of course, I can take my 150 videos on my channel and upload them to Apple and have them replicate that for that feature. Right? So, again, this is not like it sounds scary, like profiles of customers. The reason why profiles of customers was bad in many ways when Google and Meta did it was because a lot of it was not used to power any features you care about. It was designed to power a huge advertising machine. And then you as an end user, you technically got some free stuff out of it, but it's also very questionable just like what the value you get back actually is, given that these companies operate at like 40 to 70% profit margins depending on the division. So it's not like they handed you back like 80% of the savings or something like that, maybe like 5% or something. It's not like they gave you a lot less ads because the ads were now so much better. So yeah, it's a very nuanced discussion, and to me, neither Google nor Meta are like super bad or evil. I dislike a lot of the influence that Meta has generally, but I wouldn't want to delete it from the face of the world. I still think it should be more up to consumers, and that way I'm a little bit of a libertarian, even though I'm a very left-leaning person. I think a lot of the problems of those companies have more to do that there's basically no meaningful like worldwide government regulation on how much data can they collect? How much should they be actually forced to almost reimburse customers for the amount of crazy big data they have collected and stuff like that? This is my problem. It was never a problem that they could build like a customer profile and then use their extensive knowledge of you to give you much better results from an assistant, from basically the on-device smarts and stuff like that. I never had a problem with that. Apple will also probably tout the security features of the M series chips that it's using to conduct the cloud processing. I think that Apple will just say they're private and secure, and they will probably write a white paper on like what exactly they do to make that happen. That might not be enough to win over privacy advocates. I don't care about that. I've seen a lot of them being very disingenuous, and we've seen that in like the CSAM debate where Apple bent over backwards and like implementing the most basic CSAM scanning ever. People still weren't happy. Apple eventually relented and basically copy-pasted the arguments made by privacy advocates. I don't know how big of an actual technical backdoor this created, but I know also Apple is like a big company. Believe me, they care more about not necessarily what privacy advocates say, but what people believe. So they will actually sacrifice even the tiny chance of detecting CSAM material in order to appease customers. That's very much what they're obligated to do to their shareholders and stuff like that. And I was very much in favor for having feature that yes, infringed on my privacy in a way by providing a basic mathematics scan of the photos I uploaded to Apple's cloud, to make sure that it's not CSAM. And this is like the third stream in a row where I'm forced to talk about CSAM, and I hate that. But yeah, so Apple will basically try to appease privacy advocates, fail to do it completely. Most people still won't care unless there's actually like a big conspiracy theory like what we had with that CSAM stuff. That's why I mentioned it. But I don't think most customers will care either way. Yeah, that's smart, Mark Gurman. This is the smartest thing you have written in this paragraph after calling this an about face. Now, many of these features will be purely ketchup or maybe mayonnaise. There's no leapfrogging here. Again, this is you cannot say it that way. We don't know how good those features are. The fact that other features existed on other platforms, but then Apple comes in and integrates them in a different way, that's literally the Apple effect, right? Not being first, you can argue about being best, but being unique and most importantly being very mass marketable, right? So you've seen what Google is currently delivering with some of their AI efforts. Is it that difficult, do you think, to leapfrog not the technology here, not the technology that goes into Google suggesting to put glue into your pizza sauce, but how much do you think it takes to leapfrog the customer perception of a feature that gets memed on like this, right? This is, you have to understand the difference here. And if a feature basically is not used because its public perception is bad, then at that point that feature might not as well exist. We saw that on Apple's side with 3D Touch on the iPhone 6s and later, where Apple had a phenomenal feature that was not known, and then Apple deleted it in order to make devices with longer battery life and stuff like that. And unfortunately, some good stuff was lost, but most people didn't care. So will it matter that Google's Gemini AI is technically more capable? Will it matter that Google gives you crazy more stuff when it comes to like analyzing thousands of emails and giving you graphs based on those emails? Or will it only matter that, I open up the calendar app on my iPhone that I already have, and now with the email that I just got, it already knows the calendar entry it has to make, maybe an alarm clock that will wake me on that day, maybe it will suggest to me an automated response to that email, even if it's something simple, like, basically put it in, and stuff like that. Will that matter, right? So, and again, a lot of the stuff that Google showed at Google's I.O. is very much like, it's coming later this year. It's coming early next year. We are working with select partners on that. So don't think that Apple is like that far behind. A lot of the features that Google has announced are still not there yet. Google has that many of the same AI features, and some of them are obviously already great, like that memo transcription feature. I will not deny that. In its Pixel devices for several years, Samsung Electronics company rightfully threw in the towel on developing its own marquee AI features, and guess what? That didn't mean that Samsung was now dead as a hardware company, and it didn't catapult Google to new heights by having AI features for Pixel. You see how AI is not the slam dunk that like some investors pretend it is. It's about the general experience. It's about like your brand power. It's about like your support for the device. It's about the actual quality of the hardware. So this idea that like, oh, Apple is just catching up. Apple is adding some stuff that people will care about for the very first time with iOS 18. And some people will never care about AI beyond whatever Apple integrates directly into the OS. Most people will probably never touch like ChatGPT's crazy Gen AI features beyond just playing around a little bit. Most people will probably never write like an essay with it in like a serious way because they will be afraid to get caught, which we are now seeing time and time again. So don't want to be an asshole there, but for some people, all that matters here is that it's Apple doing that and that it will be part of their iPhone, of iOS, of apps they download from the App Store, and of apps that are already built into iOS. So Samsung relies on Google Gemini, part of the reason why honestly their AI features are not that fantastic. There's also no Apple designed chatbot, at least not yet. And this is where I get so freaking frustrated with the definition, because we've already talked, even in this article or in another one, like that Siri itself, Command F, Siri. There's also a more advanced Siri coming to Apple Watch for on-the-go tasks. Where's Siri? Other results? The Siri personal assistant will get an upgrade as well. There's Siri, and then there was Siri. Right? Like this idea that, oh, it's not a chat bot because it doesn't give you a response to literally every query ever. That is not true. Chatbots were like, sure, chatbots are designed to be generally conversational, but not every chatbot ever out there supports every query ever out there. Right? Like you can have chatbots that are just designed to work with one company, right? So for like customer support and stuff like that. This idea that Siri needs to become like ChatGPT in order to be considered a chatbot is honestly a little weird to me. I think whatever Apple like wants to have in like terms of chatbot features, they can just work with other companies and like insert ChatGPT or Google Gemini on top of Siri without even changing the UI. On the other hand, blah, 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 blah. Where is it? There's also no Apple designed chatbot, at least not yet. That means the company won't be competing in the highest profile area of AI. Yes, because I honestly doubt that Apple ever will be interested in that, because part of a great AI, and you can see that with like Microsoft's Copilot over the general implementation of ChatGPT, in my opinion, is you can clearly see that having an actual search engine and all the infrastructure built there and stuff like that already kind of gives you a great benefit for like a general chatbot. It still is an incredibly expensive process to make, but it definitely like lowers your barrier of entry. And since Apple does not have a search engine already, building up the entire infrastructure to now rival Google, to now rival Microsoft, to now rival ChatGPT, to now probably have to pay double the prices for Nvidia's GPUs because before that Apple was not buying them up as aggressively as Meta and others. This to me is like, I don't see why. If we have like 2 or 3 competing chatbots in the end, and they're made by the same companies that are making this current like rivaling search engines, nothing will have changed much in the end, neither for Apple nor for the companies. A market that caught fire after OpenAI released ChatGPT in late 2022. Though some of Apple's executives are philosophically opposed to the idea of an in-house chatbot, I salute those mad lads. I absolutely agree with that. There is no getting around the need for one. No! We have heard that argument for like, oh, Apple needs its own search engine because at some point Google search will be so powerful that people will stop using native apps and whatever. And now people are saying the same thing about AI. And I know that AI will be more capable in many ways than regular search engines, but do I have to remind you of putting glue in your pizza sauce again? So yeah, I actually like who like with all due respect, Mark Gurman. I understand we all like can give our opinion, but like then tell us that this is your opinion. This is not a fact-based statement whatsoever. Like I'm not saying that it's factually true that Apple does not need a chatbot. I'm saying, oh, Apple probably, according to my opinion, will survive pretty well without a chatbot. But here, Mark Gurman, who obviously has much more clout, much more reach than I do, is like saying, oh, yeah, Apple is basically doomed without a chatbot. This is like weird. And also like there are different ways, as I said, to make a chatbot. They can make Siri very conversational, and they can even make it look stuff on the web. Like Wolfram Alpha and stuff has worked like that since Siri was a thing in 2011. This idea that Siri will give you nothing that you would want from a chatbot, in fact, probably more than enough for what most people want to do with a chatbot, to me is weird. Will Apple probably not write essays for you the way that ChatGPT does? Yeah, but also Apple will just say, why should we, right? It's like, there are already solutions for this out there. It's a crazy expensive business to enter, especially since we have like a billion install base. Just covering those people would be crazy expensive. And it comes with all kinds of like legal and moral issues that Apple usually tries to stay away from. So no, Mark Gurman, here I completely disagree with. And the version that Apple has been developing itself is simply not up to snuff. Again, I doubt that Mark Gurman has a lot of deep insight into this. I wouldn't even put it into question if Apple's solutions are not like ChatGPT 4.0 level, for example, but they don't also need to be the best to work. So the solution, because people will not be comparing those side by side in regular usage, right? It's the same thing as like whenever there's like a new like a Xiaomi phone with like the largest sensor in a smartphone ever, and in some scenarios it takes better like low light images than an iPhone, and people are like, well, why do you still own an iPhone if you said that you have iPhones because they're the smartphone camera king, but now this is the smartphone camera king? And people will be like, well, for one, I'm not upgrading my phone every like 2 weeks whenever there's like a new phone that does something better. That's just how hardware works. Also, beyond that specific thing that you are hyper focusing on, there's stuff like video recording where the iPhone is still completely unbeaten. There's like color cohesion and color science cohesion between like the individual cameras and stuff like that, and how smooth the camera UI feels and stuff like that. And those are not excuses to stay on iPhone. They're just part of what works great on iPhone, but also part of course, what you consider before you would ever consider switching, right? Has my experience on my iPhone actually gotten that much worse? And unless you do side-by-side stuff with literally every other competitor, you're like, oh my god, iPhone loses in everything to like 12 phones, which neither one beats the iPhone at everything. So do I switch? No, because my experience is still great. And this is why I actually believe that Apple can have an inferior chatbot and they can just make it part of Siri, but then it will just very often tell you, sorry, I'm not doing that stuff. And yes, as they're suggesting, there might be a partnership where then Siri says, do you want me to ask like ChatGPT? Or it might even do that automatically. Depends probably a lot on how much they pay each other here. So the company has talks with both Google and OpenAI. Man, integrating Google right now, it's probably going to be dirt cheap because Google is probably looking at anyone who will take Gemini. But with OpenAI, it's going to be a question even about bandwidth, like because the amount of extra queries that you will have because Apple has now integrated a chatbot into their operating system will be crazy. It will be a lot of more compute power for ChatGPT to spend on, and they will hand those costs down to Apple as long as they're the best. In March, it seemed like Apple and Google were nearing an agreement, and people on both sides felt like something could be hammered out by WWDC. But Apple ultimately sealed the deal sooner. Oh, bless me. But ultimately, Apple sealed the deal sooner with OpenAI Chief Executive Officer Sam Altman. I didn't actually know that. I thought it was still speculative. Now Mark Gurman presents this as basically a fact. That's interesting. And their partnership will be a component of the WWDC announcement. The arrangement is a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, Apple is acknowledging that it can't compete in the hottest area of AI. But its deal with OpenAI gets it the most advanced chatbot and a potential edge over... Again, nobody cares about Apple's edge in chatbots over Samsung devices. This is not what people will buy devices for. That almost honestly makes me wonder, how much... will it all be free? If they partner with OpenAI, will they ask you to pay for ChatGPT Turbo inside of Siri? Will they maybe integrate... This is a speculation that I could have, which is could Apple integrate competing solutions or other chatbots into Siri, and they then have all the access to Siri, and whoever is their premier partner, similar to how Google Search is the default search engine in Safari. That's a very special deal. Some money flows in one direction, some money flows in the other direction. But then you can almost subscribe to a better version, and then similar to how Apple charges money for regular apps on the App Store, and then it purchases this deep OS level integrated AI solution now will pay Apple 15, 20, 30% commission for being part of Siri, for being very visible to people, and for having all that exposure, right? And maybe to OpenAI, Apple will even pay money for, because it's the best solution or whatever. I don't know, but I'm telling you, Apple is not doing that to get an edge over Samsung devices. On the other hand, OpenAI comes with risk. Altman has grown increasingly controversial in the AI world even before his bet last week with Scarlett Johansson. That was funny. OpenAI also has a precarious corporate structure, almost was briefly ousted as CEO last year, generating a crisis for employees and its chief backer, Microsoft. In other words, Apple can't be that comfortable with OpenAI as a single source supplier for one of iOS' major new features. Again, doesn't really matter that much. He is buying into a lot of the media talking points, especially for that are touted by investors and stuff like that. It won't matter that much. That's why it's still working to hash out an agreement with Google to provide Gemini as an option, but don't expect this to be showcased in June. Which, they could say that by iOS 18.1, we are now treating chatbots inside Siri like we are treating almost every app on the App Store, and there's a deep system level API, so if there are other players who want to join, similar to how we give you choices for search engines, and now how we will be giving you choices when it comes to default browsers and other stuff. You can choose another default bot, but here we do want to collect some money from that. If Apple welcomes another chatbot makers, it will probably be handled on a case-by-case basis. Right, just like not every app on the App Store can magically become a default browser option, right? Though the company often opens up features to all third-party devs, it's expected to be judicious here and hammer out individual agreements. In any case, the partnerships will help buy Apple some time until its own bot is ready. If they even try to make one at this point, right? But part of it will probably depend on if OpenAI by the end of the year not even releases ChatGPT 5 but shows it off, and it's really hyper impressive, but it's also incredibly expensive to operate, then Apple will be just, okay, there's no sense for us to build that kind of stuff from the ground up here. will probably be behind that anyway. We don't like that high of like operating costs, so we would rather spend a lot of money on getting ChatGPT and getting a guaranteed solution, but then maybe we customize it as well, right? This is like even not that crazy, right? Microsoft custom Copilot, right, where they allow like company to take like the basic feature of Copilot, right, and in Copilot Studio you can create it for yourself, both as for like a personal stuff, like basically making Copilot more personal, but also for like company stuff. So you can offer like a Copilot, basically a chatbot that works only with the kind of features that your company provides. So yeah, I can absolutely see that happening. The big question is whether it really matters that Apple is playing catch-up here. The company has one advantage that few rivals can match: its massive base of users. There will be hundreds of millions of Apple devices around the world that can support the AI features when they debut later this year. The owners of those devices will probably at least try out the new capabilities. The tech might be integrated tightly enough that people won't even notice they're using them. That could turn Apple into the biggest AI player overnight. Right, we have seen that with a lot of stuff, like Google copies like a feature from like a small website and whatever, and yeah, now that feature is like used 10 times more, and that company might die, but it might also get like a boost because just that kind of feature has gotten more exposure. Yeah, I think something similar could happen here. But even now, there are signs that the company's AI initiative is a work in progress. This is why I'm saying expect a lot of AI rollout from Apple in the next 2 years. And beyond that, of course, they will keep on improving it. But I just believe that after 2 years, we will have like a general image of what does Apple want to do on device? What does Apple want to do in the cloud? What does Apple want to handle themselves? What does Apple want to hand over to partners, right? I think this is what you should look out for. Apple is considering marketing the capabilities as a preview, which is, by the way, exactly how they introduced Siri. Google. By the way, guys, do you see how bad Google is to find anything old? iOS 5 includes a Siri Intelligent Assistant. Wait, Siri was first launched as a beta, right? Am I getting this wrong? Yep. It even says that on Wikipedia. That's a German Wikipedia, that Siri launched at first as a beta. I am correct. They speak many languages, but primarily I'm too stupid to change my Google search fully into German. It gives me English because I have configured it to English and my whole OS is English. But if I just scroll down, it just turns into German because it sees that it comes from like a German IP address. Thank you, Google. You definitely have not gotten a lot worse. At least in developer beta versions before a formal launch in September. This is a cop-out. This is a cop-out of him not knowing how Apple will actually choose to market it, because if it's part of a developer beta, then everything in it is a beta. But if it launches on an official version and it still has like the beta tag in it, which again Siri had, there's a difference here, Mark Gurman, and I believe if you knew 100%, you would state it without that thing, indicating that the technology isn't yet fully baked. That would be an inauspicious move, especially when you consider Apple's history. Siri launched as a beta in 2011. Maybe I should have pre-read that article. And given its struggles keeping up with the competition, arguably still feels like one. I would argue for stuff that actually like I do, timers, alarms, clocks, reminders, calendar entries, it's probably the best one in many ways, especially with how fast it is. But of course, Siri in many ways is very, very dumb. So yes, now he talks about other tech. I'm not that interested in that. I think this was a great write-up and something I really enjoyed reading. I've seen like the summaries on other websites, but this was actually like probably one of his best written write-ups in quite a while, so I very much enjoyed it. There was some stuff that I disagree with, some stuff where he like overemphasizes the importance of chatbots, the way he like basically says that Apple running anything on cloud is like an about face move, which I definitely disagree with. But yeah, it still was interesting. Definitely good to know that AI will permeate iOS 18 in general. He mentioned that very briefly, but he said that like Siri would also be like an Apple Watch thing. Which I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know if that means that there will be like on device Siri for maybe like the latest Apple Watch, like the Apple Watch Ultra 2 or something like that. If Apple Watch by itself can compute AI, or maybe it will just hand off those tasks to iPhone. That itself is also possible. But yeah, this is definitely something that I would be also interested to see, because I assume that similar to how Apple usually presents features, they won't actually present all features for iOS 18, right? They will then present apps and stuff, and there are now AI functionality for watchOS, for macOS, but then when you go to their website, you will actually find out that those features are shared basically between most of their operating systems. So it's funny because we assume if something is shown for iOS that it's kind of iOS exclusive, but it's kind of the opposite. If something is shown for Apple Watch, then we kind of assume that of course that's also part of iOS. So yeah, that's just like a mind thing for me. Like how much will Apple actually focus on device compute for like almost like an accessory like Apple Watch, because they do now have neural engines in like their latest Apple Watches, but maybe it just makes more sense to give that feature to an iPhone. But then what happens if you have like the latest Apple Watch but then not the latest iPhone, but then probably even like a few years old iPhone is still like computationally much more powerful than even the latest Apple Watch. So that's definitely interesting. Then of course Apple will talk about AI with like individual apps. Some stuff might actually not be shown at the WWDC opening keynote. I would assume that a lot of talk about developer tools will be like later in the week in like conferences that are more tailored towards developers with like more complicated words basically. And generative AI itself, I assume, will be far less of a focus beyond like something that Apple can control really well, like what we've discussed about stuff like emojis. The customization stuff is interesting. Again, we have not gotten too much detail here. Apple is probably getting rid of like that closed grid that puts everything into place that we've had on iOS forever, and they will let you customize app icons, he says, in color, maybe as a full-on like skin pack. So I hope that we won't actually get all those questions answered before WWDC. I definitely prefer getting the details directly from Apple, and I prefer getting them in like a pretty way. But I do assume that we will get like a similar write-up like next week, and then the week after, like right the night basically before WWDC, Mark Gurman spills the beans, because at that point people will be much more ready to leak stuff, because it's getting announced in a day or so anyway. So I will keep my eyes out on that for you. I hope that you will join me, of course, as I then react live to the WWDC. But before that, all the leaks and rumors that will be coming out beforehand. As I've also promised, I do want to react to a lot of like Snapdragon X Plus, Snapdragon X Elite stuff, but it's all coming out very like piece by piece, and we still obviously don't have like official reviews because most of the official devices aren't out yet. So I just want to say I will be covering more, but I do need more data for that. For smaller coverage, you can follow me on Twitter, and beyond following me on Twitter, of course, you can support this channel by, when I'm live, you can send a super chat or a super sticker, or you can subscribe to my Patreon, ranging from a free tier to a Mark Tech Pro Max next year. But of course, just watching the videos helps, subscribing to the channel helps, commenting on the videos either live or when the video has been uploaded is great for the algorithm, liking it, sharing it out to anyone who you think will enjoy it. All of that is greatly appreciated. Until I see you next time, let me know what you would like to see me cover in future videos. We'll probably get some more leaks and rumors over the next 2 weeks that I'll just cover automatically, but I really wanted to cover this Mark Gurman write-up, and I'll definitely be covering the next one. So I'll see you at the very worst then, but probably a lot sooner. Thank you so much for your continued support. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.